Greetings to whatever time this finds you. We're working on collecting some more quotes to read to our loved ones who have passed, and in the need to understand the concept of reincarnation, evolution, and the path of infinity of the soul. We are told that this is a great service to those who will receive a better comprehension of their path into future lives, even after having given up their body. So in the meantime, we are still a bit hesitant about talking about death and transition here. And yet we find great pleasure in discussing and thinking about the very next meal every day. As spiritual beings, there's a need to see ourselves not so much as temporary bodies, but as beings of light, striving towards the path of infinite perfection. The studies and reminders of the process of leaving behind the vehicle that karma built for us should be a joy of accomplishment and an opportunity to greater wisdom and service in the future. Elimination of fear and stress, and having faith and calmness of spirit in the new steps of the path of the soul directs it to the right sphere of higher worlds for ourselves and in praying for loved ones who have gone back. In the book, Agni Yoga, verse 130, it says about transition, you will say to him, it behooves us, even in the greatest turmoil and revolt, to retain our calmness of spirit. This verse about calmness of spirit is so essential. He will reply, your truth is not new. Why should I strain the calmness of my body in a tremor of tension? Answer him, this is the law of perfection. He will reply, even this is not new. Where are the advantage of perfection? You will answer, the exercise of calmness leads to the mastery of various states of the body. At the change of the body, a spirit that has not sought to advance enters a condition of inertia and wanders about depressed by its unrealized memories. Thereupon, the debased memories plunge into a state without a glimmer of light. It is essential to avoid a state of indifference while changing the body. Perfection of striving will afford calmness during the transition from body to body. Thus is achieved the quality of the Arhat, who never interrupts the flow of consciousness and constantly strives towards the future. Unquote. So important to have a state of indifference while changing the body. Not to leave the eye of consciousness closed and up to our own lower imagination and judgment. Calmness of spirit inspires tranquility of the great change of existence. The teachings say that in 200 or 300 years, we'll see the abolition of death, as we now understand that great transition and the establishing of the fact of the soul's existence. We can see this process coming into fruition already by the so many near-death experiences that have been recorded. We thought it would be informative to hear some of them here. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, had such an experience and says, I was about to enter an illuminate room and would meet there those people to whom I belonged to in reality. There I would at last understand, this too was a certainty, what historical nexus I or my life fitted into. I would know what had been before me and why I had come into being and where my life was flowing. I had the feeling that I was an historical fragment, an excerpt for which the preceding and succeeding text was missing. My life seemed to be snipped out of a long chain of events. And he added that I have never since entirely freed myself of the impression that this life is a segment of existence which is enacted in a three-dimensional box-like universe, especially set up for it. Another near-death experience was told by a woman from a Hispanic Catholic background. Her near-death experience was triggered by a brain aneurysm and gradually transformed her life. She described the customary tunnel, the painless voyage to a blissful realm, and to a place where light more brilliant than the sun felt like it was caressing her. It was loving, approving, and safe. A review took place in the presence of a being that she identified as God, and by whom she was surprisingly told, become more selfish. This caused her to doubt her understanding of her faith. Nevertheless, the experience produced a definite change in her personality, which resulted in a less passive and more vital engagement in life. She became more assertive, less self-confident, more aware of male dominance over women, and more concerned that she use her full potential. She had developed a need to learn, understand, and develop something of the non-judgmental and unconditional love of the presence she had felt began to fill her, changing her life. So it's so useful to remember that all our problems, difficulties, failures, successes, and achievements must be observed from the viewpoint of our destination. It may be true that on many occasions we fail, but if we keep the vision of the fiery world in our hearts, our failures will provide the fuel for a new enthusiasm to go forward with greater striving. Most of our failures can turn into stepping stones in our future achievements. In Leaves of Moria's Garden 2, part 2, verse 4 says, one may strive upwards towards light, seeking to render assistance. Then there is no parting. If those who remain will consider the departed as having been sent to light for enlightenment, then the communion would be more sound. The loftier the spirit, the more he beholds. It depends on the development of the spirit. A lofty spirit feels whither to strive. It flies like an arrow. But a dark one hovers behind the stove. Therefore, precious is the bold desire to seek, because he who seeks finds. If the desires of the spirits are lofty it can discover lofty forms, and in creating them, it can contribute to perfectment, unquote. Where in the case of an ordinary man, where death is the battle between the physical elemental and the soul is a notable factor. Where disciples are concerned, the conflict will be more purely a mental one, and is often focused around the will to serve and the determination to fulfill an aspect of the plan. Where initiates are concerned, there is no conflict, but simply a conscious and deliberate withdrawal. In whatever category we are in, what is most important? Getting rid of the fear of death. The fear of karma is a much more scary than the fear of death. When we die, there are many invisible helpers and loved ones who meet us on the other side and guides us, helping us to know that we left our body and we are in another dimension for which we need just a little bit of training. Thus, any aspect, any event needing a new action must be seen from both sides if we want to have clear vision about the consequences. A story in relations to this. As he lay dying on the ground near his mangled car, comedian Sam Kinison was heard talking softly with an unseen presence. An individual at the scene later told the reporter from the Las Vegas Sun what he had said as he conversed with somebody upstairs. Sam pleaded, "I don't want to die." Then he paused as if listening to a voice speak to him. "But why?" he countered. Then he replied, "Okay, okay, okay." And with the last okay, so soft, so peaceful, so sweet, it was as if Sam's concerns were put to rest by someone he loved and fully trusted, and he relaxed and died. Another experience from a man named Brian from California was driving his camper home from an outing in the desert when his brakes failed. He remembers seeing his blood-soaked clothes and his head split in two places before he was engulfed by many colors and blinding white tunnel. "I visited different types of worlds," he told, "many with different colored skies. I was shown many varied life forms and civilizations in this universe. Some appeared frightening and some wondrously beautiful. My understanding of my previous life was so different from what I was experiencing. The only thoughts that kept repeating to me were, if I had only known of the beauty I was seeing, I must stop being so fearful and egotistical in the assumption that I had the only intelligence in the universe." Brian was met by what he calls a highly evolved spirit who told him about his past lives. This was his first exposure to the subject of reincarnation, and it rendered him speechless. And let me just quickly finish this. I know it's time. And because of studies of what happened to people who undergo near-death experiences and other consciousness transforming episodes, since science and the professional community are taking note, and what they're finding is transforming them. Dr. Bruce Grayson, for instance, when researching mystical experiences, discovered that all 9 of the major features that identify these states exactly matched how the near-death phenomenon affects people. Compare these features for yourself. 1, a sense of cosmic unity. 2, transcendence of time and space. 3, deeply felt positive mood. 4, a sense of sacredness. 5, noetic quality and intuitive illumination. 6, paradoxal example, I'm dead and yet I'm alive. I'm one with everything and yet I'm myself. I'm overcome with love and yet I'm beyond emotion. 7, infallible, incapable of being expressed. 8, transient, lasting only a short time. And 9, persistent positive effect. And kudos to science for finding that. And now Gay Hendon will continue.
In the next 15-minute segment, I'll be sharing a few more real life near-death experiences, or NDEs. So regardless of your religious beliefs or your beliefs in general, one cannot deny legends and stories of a life after death. For thousands of years, people who have had near-death experiences have brought back stories varying in details, but overall very similar. From the Christians' heaven, with stories of the pearly gates and streets paved with gold, to the enigmatic white light experience. Many doctors and scientists dismiss this and explain it as the brain synapses dying. Well, anyone who has had such an experience can substantiate the validity of it. Fortunately, humanity is in a much better place now than in previous generations to discover and truly understand what happens when we die. What happens when our consciousness withdraws due to accident, coma, or death. I'd like to begin with one of the first NDE stories I literally stumbled on years ago. In 1995, I ran across a profound made-for-television movie called Saved by the Light, starring Eric Roberts, based on an international bestseller of the same name written by Danny and Brinkley. I'd like to share a few highlights of the movie, so spoiler alert. The movie begins in South Carolina in 1975. Danny and Brinkley is a Vietnam vet, works as a delivery man in his parents' store, is married to a lovely woman, but has a very dark, angry side. He was unfaithful to his wife and a horrible bully since childhood to everyone around him. His life took a dramatic turn when he was struck by lightning while talking on the phone. Pronounced dead at the hospital, he miraculously revives and takes an amazing trip to the other side of life and death. A being of light tells him that love makes a difference and shows him the effects that his rage has had on those he hurt, from those he bullied on the playground to those he fought in Vietnam. The voice tells him to look at a future without hope. He's shown a collage of images involving natural disasters, famine, poverty, and war. The voice tells him this bleak future for him doesn't have to happen. The near-death experience has a transformative effect on him, and he tries to make amends with his parents, wife, and all those he made suffer. While helping a woman escape her abusive husband, he injures his hand, resulting in a catastrophic infection, which damages his heart. The doctors tell him that he has to have surgery as a matter of life and death, so he agrees. And he has another near-death experience while on the table. He sees how he had loved and helped others in his new life. He had a beautiful vision of seeing his mother reunited in heaven with her little sister. In the end, he is shown speaking his message to others and admitting that he is a most unlikely messenger. I couldn't find anything about the availability of the movie, but the book is available on Amazon. Another more recent story is about the atheist neurosurgeon, Dr. Eben Alexander, who wrote the 2012 bestseller, Proof of Heaven, A Neurosurgeon's Journey into the Afterlife. The book expounds on his near-death experience while suffering from bacterial meningitis and was subsequently placed under a medically induced coma. I won't go into the details, but Dr. Alexander describes how the experience changed his perception of life and the afterlife. The book was a commercial success, but also the subject of scientific criticism, as you can well imagine. I've read this book and it's fascinating. Currently, Dr. Alexander lectures around the world in churches, hospitals, universities, academia, and has been on numerous television programs. Adam Tapp was 35 years old when he died. A paramedic in London for 15 years, Tapp was doing some woodworking in his shop when, as he says, he got a little cavalier with the wood etching device. The device arced in his hand and electrocuted him, and his heart stopped for 11 and a half minutes. He said, "It was like someone flipped a switch. All my senses were overwhelmed by 12,000 volts of DC electricity. It was one of the most excruciating, painful things I've ever experienced." The following are a few little snippets from just ordinary people. One man who had an NDA as a child recalled the experience of meeting dead relatives. "There were some presents there. There were some ladies. I didn't recognize them at the time. They were so loving and so wonderful, and I just didn't want to come back. I didn't see any pictures of them until I was an adult. And I said, oh yeah, I remember. They were my great-grandmothers who had died years before I was born." Here's one about the life review. When he realized that a car collision was imminent, he said that time seemed to pass slowly, time seemed to slow down as he hit his brakes and went into an uncontrollable slide. Then he seemed to pop out of his body. While in this state, he had a life review, which consisted of brief pictures, flashes of his life. His car struck a truck and the truck bed crashed through the window, causing multiple injuries to his head and chest. Medical reports show that he was in a coma and nearly died. Yet he had a vivid sensation of leaving his body and entering into darkness. He had a sudden feeling of moving up through a dark tunnel toward a point of light, suddenly being filled with love and light. Now he had a second life review, or the proper life review, one guided by a being of light. He felt bathed in love and compassion as he reviewed the moral choices he had made in his lifetime. He suddenly understood that he was an important part of the universe and that his life had a purpose. Some blind people report being able to see during their NDE. Dr. Brian Weiss tells the story of a blind, elderly woman who suffered a cardiac arrest during her stay in the hospital. She was unconscious as the resuscitation team tried to revive her. According to her later report, she floated out of her body and stood near the window watching the resuscitation. She observed without any pain whatsoever as they thumped on her chest and pumped air into her lungs. During the resuscitation, a pin fell out of the doctor's pocket and rolled near the same window where her out-of-body spirit was standing and watching. The doctor eventually walked over, picked up the pin, and put it back in his pocket. He then rejoined the frantic effort to save her, and they succeeded. Luckily, Tapp had a friend. Oh, excuse me, my pages got mixed up. Sorry. A few days later, she told her doctor that she had observed the resuscitation team at work during her cardiac arrest. No, he soothingly reassured her. You were probably hallucinating because of the lack of oxygen to your brain. This can happen when the heart stops beating. But I saw your pin roll over to the window, she replied. Then she described the pin and other details of the resuscitation. The doctor was shocked. His patient had not only been comatose during the resuscitation, but she had also been blind for many years. Even very young children have reported similar experiences. Take the case of 4-year-old Tom, the son of a British soldier. Little Tom had been complaining of stomach pains and was writhing in agony when doctors discovered that the boy had an intestinal blockage and immediately operated. It was touch and go, but Tom survived. A few months later, his father had a day off and asked him where he'd like to go. Little Tom said he wanted to go to that park again. When asked which park, he said, the one through the tunnel that I went to when I was in the hospital. The park had lots of children and swings and things with a white fence around it. I tried to climb over the fence, but this man stopped me and said that I wasn't to go yet. He sent me back down the tunnel and I was back in the hospital again. You can find many, many examples now on YouTube of people's near-death experiences, as well as many articles and books written about them. So in conclusion, we must all face our inevitable death. Regardless of the condition of our health, we need to prepare ourselves. The morbid attitude of the masses and their refusal to consider death, even when one is healthy, is something which must die out. The transitional experience is a great adventure. It governs our entire planetary life. Death is only another step in the way towards light, life, and enlightenment. I'd like to end a quote from Leaves of Moria's Garden, Volume 2, paragraph 100. If those left behind would regard the departed as being sent to light and for light, the communion would be sounder. The loftier the spirit, the more it sees. Everything depends on the spirit. A lofty spirit has a sense of where it is speeding off to, and it flies away like an arrow. But a dark spirit prowls around the furnace. This is why a bold desire to seek is so precious. He who seeks will find. If his desires are lofty ones, the spirit can discover lofty forms by creating them, contributing to the process of perfection, end quote. So be fearless, be courageous, be daring, and keep striving. If you'd like to join the Death and Transition Focus Group, contact the White Mountain Education Association office, and they will make it happen. Thank you.